Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm glad you could join us today. My name is Lola Yonda. I am the Communications Manager for the Moving Minds Alliance. This meeting is available in English and Spanish, so we put in the chat for those of us that are not English speakers. In case you wanted to access this meeting in Spanish, there's an instruction on how to do that in the chat box. If this is your first time connecting with us, a quick introduction. Moving Minds Alliance is a multi-stakeholder alliance committed to making early childhood development prioritized in every crisis response. We bring together a wide range of actors, from local organizations to global partners, to advocate for inclusive policies and increased investments that enables deliver holistic nurturing care for the youngest children in crisis. And when we talk about crisis, of course, we talk about displacement as well. Now, in the course of our work, especially at a time when communities are making this point known, they keep reminding us that no decision about them should be made without them. One question we keep grappling with as Moving Minds Alliance is how can we meaningfully, ethically involve children in shaping our advocacy, our messaging, and our initiatives? And so when Child Arise came up with this project, it became something that was a learning experience for us. But one thing we've seen as well as MMA is that children have a lot to say if we listen. And we hope that from this meeting today, from this screening, you are able to also share your feedback with us on how we think or how you think you can use some of these resources that Child Arise have produced. So what should you expect in the next 50 minutes that you're with us? You will see 2 short clips and 1 film. The short clips takes you behind the scenes and offers some updates on children involved. You would also hear reflection, those in the context, and of course, there will be time for you to share with us your questions, which will be led by Shweta. If anything comes to mind in the course of this meeting, you can please use the Q&A feature on your screen to drop your questions, and then we'll take your questions later. Just to give credit to those credit is due, the film itself was produced by Child Arise, which is co-founded by Lucy Bassett and Shweta Shah, right here in the call. Shweta Shah is a fellow at the Brookings Institution, and Brookings will also be developing a case study on Colombia, and that will be adding to their existing case studies from Turkey and Bangladesh. Basically, all this case study is all aimed at examining young children's voices in crisis context. And on that note, I will hand you over now to Lucy, who will tell you more about Child Arise, its partners it worked with on this project, and the filmmaking process. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lola, and welcome everyone. It's delightful to see a number of familiar names and some new names on the call. So I love that the screen here shows these smiling children and some of the art behind them, because I feel like that just really captures the essence of what we're showing here. I'll give you a bit of background before you get to start seeing and hearing from the kids directly. As Lola mentioned, this is a project that was developed by Child Arise, and it really was from the very beginning and all the way through a collaborative process. It began with a handful of us during COVID needing connection and thinking about what would make our work more meaningful, thinking about people and children in different parts of the world, and, what could we kind of do differently? How could we think about things differently? And really reflecting on the fact that so much humanitarian response and even ECD work that really centers kids is being done kind of for children and on behalf of children. But as Lola mentioned, it's like, how do we do it and have it be done by children? And how do children get to kind of guide and steer things? And so the project kind of emerged from that real commitment to hearing from children, having them be the main driving voice, and really getting to hear their perspectives. So thanks to funding from the Lego Foundation, I'm happy to see Anita is here, who has a big part of that, channeled through MMA and IRC, the International Rescue Committee, and their wonderful team globally and in Colombia. Child Arise worked with an organization in Colombia called La Otra Juventud, who's now renamed to La Parlante, an organization that has for many years been working on elevating children's voices and working with young people in communities. And we implemented the project in 2 locations because we recognized the diversity of migrant experiences. This was focused on Venezuelan children who had come to Colombia. But we know that no matter what migration story we're telling, there are multiple stories. And so we picked 2 locations to kind of be able to feature 2 kind of types of migration. In Bogota, it was more likely to be families and children who had moved and wanted to settle in Colombia. And in Medellin, it was more likely to be families and children who were kind of in transit, and that was a stopping point. In each of those 2 cities, we worked with a local Venezuelan migrant-led organization that really helped connect us to the children and families in meaningful ways. And there are about 40 kids who participated in both of these locations. And we paid really a ton of attention to making sure that the families and the children knew what they were getting into, had a lot of choice, could opt in and out of various activities, and at different points could really have a sense of control about how their stories and their contributions would be used. And the idea was to get to hear their stories about migration and their perspectives on what it means to be kind of a new person, someone coming into a country and feeling different and new. And so we used a lot of child-centered participatory methodologies, which you'll see in a few moments when we show the behind the scenes. And the kids, I just want to let you know, I talked about this being collaborative, and I've mentioned a lot of organizations, but it was also really collaborative with the kids being involved in, they were the ones who really helped brainstorm the name of the project, which is called Sueños en Ruta, or Dreams en Route, dreams along their journey, and the logo and the colors, and the project culminated in a series of products, which are kind of audiovisual, some short films, a longer, still short documentary. And so the kids were also involved, as you'll see, in obviously being the subjects of this, but also being kind of behind the camera on both sides and contributing to the content of that. So I think I'll pause and actually let you see what this looked like. And Lola, you can start, but we'll take you behind the scenes and you'll hear a little bit from the team in Colombia that was facilitating this work
Creamos un
directly.
espacio donde las niñas y los niños se permitieron explorar y narrar la migración a través de sus propias experiencias.
Sueños en Ruta nace de la alianza de varias organizaciones, entre ellas Child Arise, el Comité Internacional de Rescate y la Fundación La Otra Juventud. Esta alianza empieza a trabajar con la niñez migrante y busca elevar sus voces para que podamos ver el fenómeno migratorio desde una mirada de infancia.
Bueno, durante estas reuniones iniciales el equipo empezó a hacerse diferentes cuestionamientos. Surgen preguntas de cómo los niños y las niñas afrontan actualmente estos retos migratorios, cómo también desarrollan habilidades emocionales y también pues ver todo este entorno, todo este contexto desde su perspectiva. Entonces desde allí empezamos a orquestar colectivamente estas rutas, estos caminos que nos permitieran crear una metodología aliada o cercana a las personas de la comunidad y que le permitiera también hacer eco a las voces de los niños y las niñas como un espacio también seguro que no se ha podido hacer en otros momentos.
Luego pasamos a los primeros relacionamientos en los que con el apoyo de varias organizaciones de base en la ciudad de Bogotá y Medellín, Fraternidad Venezolana, Asociación Palco y la Corporación Combos, empezamos a focalizar a las familias que iban a ser participantes de estos procesos en la ciudad de Bogotá y Medellín. Durante varias sesiones nos conocimos, jugamos y creamos universos relacionados con sus experiencias de viaje. También reconocimos la diferencia que hay en cada proceso migratorio, sumado a que cada niña o niño es un mundo completamente único. El compartir de todas estas experiencias y de todas estas historias entre las familias también fortaleció este lazo de resiliencia colectiva que se fue construyendo a lo largo del proyecto.
Luego continuamos con el ejercicio de coproducción. Coproducir es muy difícil porque es una etapa en la que el equipo debe abrirse a escuchar un poco más con detalle las experiencias de los niños y las niñas, darle la atención que requieren los niños y las niñas que son los protagonistas, resaltar todo aquello que quieren decir, cómo quieren contarlo y adaptarse a un sentido de pares donde todos tenemos la misma relevancia. Los equipos audiovisuales siempre fueron un gran atrayente para los niños y las niñas, ya sea delante de la cámara como protagonistas o detrás de ella como productores. Acompañamos a nuestros participantes en sus casas, en sus gustos y en sus deseos. Tanto así que resultaron estos productos audiovisuales híbridos que fueron transformándose en el camino y en los que resalta muy bien el proceso de coproducción.
Estos eventos están orientados a poder visibilizar un poco lo que hemos desarrollado desde el proyecto de Sueños en Ruta. Vamos a estar desarrollando dos acciones específicas. Uno es un conversatorio acompañado de un brunch que va a tener como un diálogo aperturado desde cuáles son esas perspectivas de retos que viven los niños y las niñas desde un proceso migratorio y qué podemos hacer también en alianza de varias organizaciones para poder continuar visibilizando las voces de niñas y niños cuando se ven enfrentados a estos procesos de migración, cuál es su visión frente al migrar, y también de esta acción pueden salir diversos procesos de incidencia que nos pueden ayudar a fortalecer este ecosistema de la infancia.
Ver alianzas o posibles alianzas a futuro que nos permitan seguir trabajando por los niños, por las niñas.
Visibilizar esa fuerza de las infancias que también pues son importantes, sus medidas de afrontamiento y sus mecanismos de resiliencia también.
Conocer otras miradas que tenemos de la migración. Creo que cuando se habla de migración, pues generalmente nos imaginamos pues a personas adultas, pero olvidamos pues cómo viven las infancias pues estos procesos también de inestabilidad.
Thank you, Lola. So I hope that helped bring this to life a little and show you just the amount of passion and energy that went into this, and the real engagement of the kids. You saw them drawing, you saw them painting, you saw them cutting, you saw them holding a mic behind the camera, supporting each other. And in a moment, we will show you the short film. This is the first time this is being shown, besides in those events that you saw in the making of film, where it was shown in Colombia to a huge audience of both Colombians and Venezuelans. But I wanted to just tell you briefly a few things that the kids and some of the local organizations said about the process, because we think today is about showing this particular product, and we'll also later on link you and connect you with some of the others that we produce. But it's really also about the process and what being part of something like this can do for the participants and for the viewers and sort of decision makers. But the kids really, so you see the kids in this photo here, these are kids from different parts of Venezuela, and these are kids who are in different parts of Colombia at the time that this was done. And for those children, some of the things that they said were really, really valuable were one said, one 9-year-old girl, the one in the purple in the back, said, "It felt good telling my story of migration challenges and what was hard. So it was finally a place to be able to talk about what was difficult." The girl in the front in the sort of leopard print, the best was telling the story to other people. And almost all of them commented on how good it felt to be able to hear that other kids like them, even from different parts of both countries, had these experiences and that they weren't alone. And then the organizations also really valued being able to work this way collaboratively with the kids. And one said the project allowed the children to frame their story as one of strength and turn toward the future. So I love that, given the name Dreams en Route, like really this sense of being able to overcome the challenges through sharing them and through kind of shared experience. And so this next segment here will be a short documentary style video showing a few of the children's migration stories and some common themes across their experiences. And as I mentioned before, just remember that this was all done in a very supported environment. We wanted to make sure that no one was, you know, telling a story of difficulty without receiving support and opting in to sharing this. So we're very proud to share their stories, and we're delighted that you get to see them now. Thank you.
Cuando uno iba caminando, pues los de edificios, casas, le gritaban a uno muchas cosas feas, de que por qué no se quedaban en su país, en vez de estar acá. Yo le decía, mamá, ya vamos a llegar. Y me falta mucho. Natalia estaba cantando mucho. Yo le decía, mamá, ya vamos a llegar. Y al medio pasito, mamá, ya vamos a llegar. El viaje para acá fue duro porque mi mamá y mi papá, me ponían pasaportes y siempre los terminaban como que no.
Prácticamente se sacó ilegal, porque ella solamente iba con el permiso que da la LONA, pues por la frontera, pero al llegar a territorio colombiano, pues obviamente ya ese documento no era válido.
En Venezuela no hay trabajo, la educación es muy poca, pues los colegios tienen 2 días o 3 días sin mucho a la semana estudiando. Por ejemplo, allá dan unas bolsas de CLA y por medio de un carnet de la patria. y usted tiene que estar con el gobierno para que usted pueda recibir la bolsa del CLA. O sea, te compran a ti con una bolsa de comida.
Que alguien así tocó la puerta y cuando ya vimos era mi mamá con una maleta llena de ropas y todo eso para nosotros. En ese tiempo mi hermana ya había hecho la comunión y le celebraron y le pusieron un pastel y todavía tenía harto y mi papá no le gustaba tanto. Entonces mi mamá le dijo que si no los podía traer pues para llenar algo de reseñas de comida para el camino. Y él dijo que no, y dijo más para mí, eso sí, nunca se me va a olvidar, cuando él dijo más para mí y dijo chao.
Cuando yo me vine casualmente fue un día de mi cumpleaños y estaba toda la familia reunida. Pero lo que más me pegó en ese momento es que dejé a todos mis hijos porque no teníamos las posibilidades de traerlos.
Tus más íntimos amigos esta noche te acompañan. Te saluda mi desea. Un mundo de felicidad, felicidad, felicidad. Y que esta luna plateada brille su luz para ti. Y ruego a Dios porque pases un cumpleaños feliz. Porque donde nosotros vivíamos hay muchos árboles, muchísimos, no hay uno, no hay muchos. Y flores también hay muchas de muchos colores. Nosotros aprendimos a andar atrás fue con mi hermano mayor, porque cuando íbamos a un parque que era muy lejos, ellos se cansaban y iban así para atrás. Y cuando nosotros íbamos pues ya viajando, nosotros no, yo voy a caminar para atrás y no nos cansábamos. Tenía 3 añitos cuando yo vine para acá, para Colombia. Mi familia es parte de mí y eso es un buen recuerdo que tengo de Venezuela, además que los tengo acá conmigo. En ese entonces yo no sabía quién era mi mamá y yo le decía a mi abuela mamá y a mi abuelo papá.
Nos tocó, como quien dice, con terceras personas, pasar a Leslie con otra persona. Obviamente nosotros detrás de ella, para su papá de un lado y yo del otro lado, para que vigilar, como quien dice, la persona con la que ella iba, como para que tampoco se fuera a ir, no la fuera a llevar, pues obviamente. Y pues yo pasé delante, el señor con la señora pasó en el medio, Leslie arreguindadita de los dos de la mano y el papá atrás, que si cualquier cosa, pues ahí reaccionábamos al tiempo. No importa que con el miedo de que nos fueran a deportar.
Me imagino yo que fue muy fuerte para él dejarnos en pleno día de su cumpleaños, en el que en vez de irse podría estar con sus familiares, celebrando. Porque yo que me vine muy chiquita, me vine a los 3 años, dejar a mis abuelos, no me acuerdo, pero ahorita yo lo siento. Nada más puedo llamarlos en videollamada, o sea, están muy lejos como para ir para la casa de ellos.
Recuerdo bañarme con el agua que cae desde el salto del ángel, descalza subir por la montaña, una nueva ruta se abre adelante. Mis pies me piden una parada, a veces no comprendo este viaje. La trucha es un camino que calla el canto de todos los turpiales. Tambor de mi corazón, palpitan con el viento. Mi ruta y mi camino me trazan nuevos sueños.
Primero nos dijeron que nos callemos la boca porque nadie se tenía que enterar de nada. A mí me hicieron atuta, me cargaron. Pero en una de esas el señor no sé para dónde se fue y mi mamá pues yo vi que se cayó como en un hueco. Entonces a ella sí la ayudaron pues la socorrieron, ¿me entiendes? La ayudaron a salir y me agarraron ella me agarró por un brazo y me jaló y ya llegamos al otro lado.
O sea, yo me vine con la corazonada que Maduro iba a salir. Y yo dije, no, pues 1 año, 2 años, Venezuela relativamente empieza a ser como era antes. Pero pues eso fue una decepción tanto para mí como yo creo que para el resto de los venezolanos y los que no son venezolanos, lo que pasó en Venezuela, que el fraude que hubo. Tenía como esa certeza, pero me hubiera gustado de que hubieran dicho, no, Maduro va a salir, el país va a cambiar, o quizá hubieran tenido una oportunidad mejor en Venezuela, tal vez no hubieran salido.
Pues en las necesidades que mi papá y mi mamá pues que tuvieran pues más descanso, porque yo le digo a mi papá, usted no tiene al menos un domingo, un sábado que quede con nosotros. Y mi papá dice, es que aquí se paga el arriendo, más la comida, tiene que uno trabajar. Y yo le digo a mi papá, y mi papá tiene los descansos cuando él se enferma.
O sea, lo que yo siento en general es que estoy feliz de tenerlos conmigo, ya que otras mamás no han podido ver a sus hijos la extrañan.
Es que tú dejas el corazón allá, porque ya tú tenías una vida, ya tú tenías tu familia, ya o sea, tú amas tu país. Y al saber de que te toca irte, que ni siquiera es porque quieres, sino porque te toca, ¿ya? Eso es lo más duro, porque uno tiene la mente acá, pero el alma y el corazón en Venezuela.
Normal, que hizo lo correcto, porque se vino con su mamá. Y pues nada malo está haciendo, o sea, me refiero a que no está cogiendo malas mañas ni nada, sino que está subiendo y subiendo. Aunque obviamente uno se va a caer cuando uno se tiene que levantar y ya, y seguir adelante.
Yo migré porque para ese momento la escasez, el hambre, la economía de Venezuela estaba tan complicada que estábamos entre dos cosas, o morir de hambre o salir del país para que tu familia tuviera algo que comer.
Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you. All right, I just want to take a second to absorb the stories of those kids who you can see here. As you noted at the end, this was really right at the time of the elections when Maduro took power in Venezuela. And since then, so much has changed in the world, and particularly in that context. The you know the U.S. administration has really dramatically changed its immigration policies, which has affected Venezuelan migrants as well as many others. And then the recent ousting of Maduro has really shaken up the dynamics in Venezuela and Colombia. We have, and not as many people are going north through the Darien Gap. So much of the context is different, but I think the kinds of stories that and experiences that children are having are really those feelings are still the same. We wanted to give you a brief update before we open up for your questions and feedback about these kids and what we know is happening to them. Those from Medellin, like I mentioned earlier, it was more of a transit city. So very few of them, even the local Venezuelan partners, have contact with very few of them. They've moved on, and no one has a way to reach them. So we hope that they are in safe and good conditions now. And in Bogota, we do have really still good ties with the organization Fraternidad Venezolana, who is still in touch with and engaged with the kids. So we have just a super short update video so you can see Luis and Jimena, the one who wrote the song that was playing in the background, and a few other kids. So Lola, if you could just play that brief clip, and then please be thinking about your questions or comments. And just note that in this video, because it was parents who are filming, there are a few moments that are a little quieter than others, but there's still subtitles, so you'll be able to read.
Hola, mi nombre es Jimena Hernández, trabajé en el proyecto Sueños en Ruta. Después de un año de haber estado en el proyecto, quisiera que ellos encontraran apoyo para que más niños migrantes sean escuchados. Chao, un abrazo gigante, especialmente a Child's Arise.
Hola, mucho gusto, yo me llamo Isabela Nico del Toro. Les mando un saludo muy especial a Sueños en Ruta. Les voy a contar un poco de mí. Pasé a cuarto grado y cuando sea grande quiero ser doctora. Quiero que pase una feliz Navidad y gracias por prestarme atención. ¡Chao!
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Luis Enrique Escobar Barrios. ¿Cómo están, amigos de Sueños en Ruta? Gracias a Dios, el día de antier me gradué para sexto grado y pues primordialmente gracias a mi familia porque me estuvo apoyando en todo este proceso. Y pues la verdad, yo veo a mi familia en un futuro, estando en Venezuela, con toda la familia, y pues yo quiero ser de grande un ingeniero industrial, uno de los mejores.
Hola, soy Matías, tengo 7 años, pasé a tercer grado. Mi hermanita tiene 3 meses y se llama Isabela. Mi experiencia como hermana mayor es bonita, me gusta. Desde que nació Isabela yo la he querido mucho y tiene 3 meses. ¡Feliz Navidad!
Hola, mi nombre es Sara Victoria Barrera, tengo 8 años, estudio cuarto grado de primaria, vivo con mi mami en Bogotá, Colombia. Agradezco a Sueños en Ruta por habernos ayudado en el año pasado. Sobre la situación financiera, ha estado difícil porque mi mamá tiene un trabajo de medio tiempo y las cosas se han puesto un poco tensas. Sueño ser algún día artista o cantante. Espero que tengan un feliz año nuevo y una feliz Navidad. Chao.
Ser niño migrante no es fácil porque tienes que ver a tus padres pasar cosas que nadie quisiera. Ejemplo, ver que te sacan de tu casa porque la casa pertenece al Estado o que el negocio de tu mamá fracase. Y por eso uno a veces quisiera crecer más rápido, uno de niño, o ser víctima de xenofobia sin que te conozcan. Por eso uno a veces quiere adelantar sus sueños para que se hagan más rápido y uno poder ayudar a nuestros padres. Y por eso yo quiero ser actriz y cantante y espero que se cumpla ese sueño.
Thank you. Sweta, over to you now.
Great. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. As Lola mentioned, I'm Sweta Shah. I'm one of the co-founders of Child Arise, but also a fellow at the Brookings Institution. And so, as you saw in these products, the making of video, the actual film, and then these kind of post voices, the impact on the children, I think, was something that we didn't really expect. And I think you can see that it's stayed with them and their families very much. So I'm going to open it up to questions and answers because I'm sure you all have some thoughts either about how we engage the children or just questions about what's happening. So we're going to open it up. But first, before we do that, I'm going to share just one little kind of reiterate something that Lucy mentioned, which is in the film, you heard a song that was through the film. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands and remembers that actually that song was first written as a poem by one of the children in the project. The little girl Jimena, who was the last speaker, actually, she wrote the poem, and then our Colombian partner, La Otra Juventud, worked with Jimena to make it into a song. And so when we say that the project was co-created with the children, like we really took that process seriously and really wanted what children believe to be the face and really upfront. So I'm going to start with a few reflections from our partners because I think that's really important before I open up to your questions. Put your questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to first call on my colleague Camilo Valenzuela, who's with IRC in Colombia. Camilo and his team at IRC were really supportive through the whole process. They were a core member of our team. And Camilo, I would love for you to share with us some of your reflections in terms of the impact of this process and the products and where you think, this could go in terms of influencing policymakers and others in Colombia and in the region.
Thank you, Sweta. Hi, everyone. This project has been very important for us because part of the IRC strategy is working with partners and working with local partners and partners like La Otra Juventud that are experts on child participation, and it's not easy to make in a respectful and in a protective way, put like the voices and the stories of the children and make it like is in a real participation. So the whole process to make that and the engagement with the local communities, the engagement with community-based organizations and with the families take a process. And I think that our partner, La Otra Juventud, they have this governance structure that they put participation in the center on decision making. So we have learned a lot of them. And also, I think that putting like safeguarding and the protection of children, if you can see these products, like you see how we respect the identity of the children, they respect their stories, their voices, and do it no harm. I think also like the process of making these videos in this way, it was therapeutic for children and families. And also they feel really proud of the work they're doing. And I was like in the presentation of the film in Bogota, and it was really inspiring, like seeing the children and the families. They were really empowered and proud of what they're doing. And I think that's what it is about. And regarding what is happening with migration, it seems like it's invisible, but we need to understand what is happening. Yesterday, I was in a regional meeting in the cluster in Venezuela, and there are like 8,000 families have been deported, and also like 6,000 families in under attention on protection issues, and families are returning in very bad condition against their will. Also, there are a lot of children who are like without education opportunities or protection opportunities, and migration is still relevant. And I think we know what is happening in the United States is still relevant in the but I think it seems invisible. Like for example, in countries in South America, we are not seeing that this is invisible situation. What is happening with deportations, what is happening with these families who have been like harmed within the past years. There's like funding, no support for them. Like we're still like as humanitarian actors still highlighting their voices. So more than now, I think it's important to make a statement on how supporting these children and these families is still relevant, and making like how the empowerment of migrant families and the voices and how they add value to the host communities, host countries is very important, and we are feeling very, very proud about the work and these products, and how these voices of the children and families can inspire decision makers, and something why it's very important to still doing these kind of programs and projects.
Thanks so much, Camilo, for that. I also just want to add that, part of, Lucy and Camilo and everyone's kind of mentioned that obviously active child participation was critical to this process. But the products that, came out of this process, one of the things that we're hoping as Child Arise and as Moving Minds Alliance and IRC Colombia is, to really be a counter to some of the negative narratives that are out there about migrants and about children and their abilities. So we hope that this film, and then I'm going to put in the chat also a link to our website and to all the various products that were developed through this project. But we hope to also be able to just show a more realistic view of migrants and of these people and of children and what children are able to do. So I'm going to go to the first question. It comes from Surinder Sharma. Thanks, Surinder, for your question. And she says, what are your plans for sharing and distributing the film? It feels especially important that the perspectives of these children reach elected officials shaping immigration policy, as well as members of the broader public who may not fully understand their lived experiences. So thank you for that. And I want to just open it up to Camilo, Lucy, and any others who would like to answer. I can also answer, but I want to give you all a chance first to share. And our colleague Tatiana Arias, with our partner La Otra Juventud, is also here. Unfortunately, she's been sick and she lost her voice. So she actually has a response to some of these questions as well that, if necessary, I'll also share on her behalf. But first, maybe just ask Camilo and Lucy to jump in about this question.
Sure. Maybe I'll say something very quickly, which is that we wanted to make sure, or we wanted to sort of facilitate access to these materials to different populations. And you saw in the making of film some discussions with organizations, organization leaders, and policymakers. And I think Camilo can speak more to the opportunities for that going forward. We also developed a curriculum guide, which is available in English and Spanish, in the link that I posted on the chat, that teachers can use with kids. And we've piloted that in a few classrooms already, and it's been really wonderful for kids to get to be able to hear from other kids and kind of open up conversations about difference and belonging and migration and change. So that's available to those of you in Spanish and English for different contexts.
And I'm so excited that Tatiana is also here. I don't know, Tata, if your voice is better. I did do a translation. No, okay. But she did answer that question also in the chat, and it's in Spanish, and I translated it into English as well. But Camilo, why don't you go ahead if you want to answer this question from what you're seeing at the Colombia level, and then I can also read out Tatiana's response.
Okay. This year is election year in Colombia, and there are a lot of proposals from the candidates. I think like migration and emergency response and the humanitarian work and what they do is needed to be highlighted. There's even so. Also, we are planning to influence coalition efforts from the civil society to highlight these topics and make some questions to the candidates. And also, like in the humanitarian planning, still, I think migration is still a crucial point. So we also need to advocate in the humanitarian planning to support these families and children who are like still in need, and what is happening, for example, with deportations, and not only from Venezuelans as well, from Colombians, and how we can support these families, and see highlighting how important it is to still invest in the supporting of these families, and the policy makers are aware of this situation. And I think this is the best way to do it, like highlighting the voice of the children. So I think these kind of materials are the ones who support effective advocacy efforts.
Yeah, thank you. And I can add a little bit. So, Lucy mentioned, so Camilo mentioned that, there's conversation around this topic. And I think that's one of the positive things that's come out of this project is that and Tatiana also mentioned this when she was telling me about her perspective, is this provided an opening for dialogue to use these tools as kind of conversation starters to begin discussing what are the issues of migration, what are children and families' experiences of migration. Lucy also mentioned the classroom guides, and that's all on our website, so you can find it in English and Spanish. I'll mention that all of the materials on the website are free and open source, so anyone can use them, and we actually encourage everyone to do so because the project officially is over, so we don't have a ton of resources to move forward with the dissemination. Yet I will say that during the project, so we are doing things like classroom, teachers are using this, getting to use the classroom guide. But I will say that while the project was going on, we did hold a brunch that La Otra Juventud and IRC organized with us to engage members of the government and members of kind of the humanitarian community, so nonprofits working in this space, again, to engage them in, what are the experiences of migrant children, and how could they then use these resources to continue to advocate. I think having the government officials there, even though Camilo said that there's going to be elections, but this was maybe more kind of lower level government officials who joined the brunch. They're more of the people who are going to do the work, not the political appointees or the political people. So I think that was really interesting, and we hope to see some progress happening. When you disseminate, that progress takes time to see change. So it's going to be a bit of a process to really see the long-term impact of this in terms of on government policies. We do know that, like in Colombia, in a number of cities, the government actually supports these migration one-stop shop centers. So they're in Bogota, they're in Medellin, they're in a number of different places around Colombia, and these are basically centers for migrants to go to try to get their legal status, get help with jobs, help with housing, help getting their kids into school. And they have TVs there. So we saw those and we thought, wouldn't it be great if some of our videos got on there? Obviously, a lot of migrants go there. So one is to help those migrants feel a sense of pride, but they're also government officials that work in those places. So that's one thing that we were talking about a lot in terms of dissemination and taking it forward. So there are a number of things that we're thinking. This film is going to be on YouTube very soon. So we're hoping to have more events such as these and conversations to get, to spread the word about this as well. So let me see what else, if we have any other questions. Okay, so I think another comment is around, getting stories from the host community children as well. And I think that's a really important piece as well, because in fact, you may have picked up in the film that that the children experienced, some they experienced some discrimination as they were trying to integrate into Colombian schools, because it does create in these contexts sometimes tension when you have people from another place integrating and using services of the host community. There were many limitations to this project, so in this case we were unable to really do the same level of engagement with the host community as we did with the migrant children. It's definitely something we thought about, and I think a really great point that in the future this would be a great thing to supplement the work of that we already did. Okay. And then Tatiana says, okay, yeah, she mentioned essentially similar to what I already mentioned about her, about using these as dialogue starters. It's not just the video is not just a product, but it's a tool that can be used to change perspectives. And then Anita says, great. So Anita, you're asking the question about how MMA could use this, and that's a perfect transition for us, for me to hand over to Katie Murphy, who's the interim director of the Moving Minds Alliance, because she's going to actually be talking about exactly this point and providing the closing for us today. So thanks for engaging with us, and handing it over to you, Katie.
Thanks so much, Sweta, Lucy, Camilo, Tata, and everyone. This has been an amazing session, and I've watched the film now various times, but it never fails to choke me up and really, speak to the caregiver in all of us, and those who are working with children and know how critical the voices and perspectives of children are. I think what also this highlights, and I love the behind the scenes and making of video, because even perhaps more important than the final product, which is so powerful and beautiful, is the process, right? And the process, as Tata mentions in her comments, is about these tools to engage with children, not just for us to learn. Of course, we're learning a ton by listening to these perspectives, but it also are tools for the children themselves to learn about their own experience and their own perspective. As Seda points out in the comments, I think we all were struck by the child who was reflecting on what he would tell his 3-year-old self. And what a powerful way to have a child reflect on what they would, their own experience, what it was like to be a 3-year-old fleeing their home country and leaving loved ones behind, and also reminding themselves of their own strength and their own capacities, and telling him not that he didn't do anything wrong, and not to be afraid. And I think that process is so critically important. So and I think the title of this webinar is perfect, in terms of when children speak, we learn. We really learn what resilience looks like. We learn what safety feels like. We learn what recovery requires. We learn about the importance of those critical relationships with caregivers and loved ones, even when you have to leave your parent behind. We're also learning where systems are failing and where policies are failing. And this is where Moving Minds Alliance really comes in. As humanitarian actors or as development actors, we're often saying that we need to center the voice of children. But in practice, we often take shortcuts. There may not be time. We might not have the luxury. So we survey caregivers, we ask service providers. All of these are important, but they only scratch the surface of the true experience of children. And this really highlights ways that we can elevate that. And for Moving Minds Alliance, we are really focused, as Lola said in the beginning, on reimagining early years crisis response. And what that means is challenging old ways of doing things, challenging old assumptions, elevating the voices of those directly affected, including children, and ensuring that the systems provide responsible, sustainable supports to ensure young children in crisis are able to thrive. So grounding those systems in evidence means that children's voices are essential. So we hope that this film will inspire all of us, and Moving Minds intends to amplify this as well, but that we can elevate the voices of children, demonstrating that it can be done. It can be done with respectful, meaningful, child-appropriate engagement, play-based engagement strategies that are so critical, and elevating these conversations with donors, with policymakers, bringing them into spaces where their physical presence may not be allowed. Sort of like the sign we saw in the hallway where children cannot play due to safety concerns. We see those signs everywhere in policy roundtables, in events and spaces. So let us bring those voices directly there. We want to ensure that we're thinking through strategically with all of you how we can draw inspiration from this process to shift the systems to align with the children's true needs, and to demonstrate how we can do this more systematically across all of our responses. So I hope that this isn't just about one documentary. This is an amazing example, but I hope it inspires all of us to think differently about how we approach our work, how we're engaging with children, how we're engaging with caregivers affected directly by crisis, and elevating their voices and bringing them into spaces where they may not typically find themselves. So I want to thank Child Arise, amazing work, La Otra Juventud, which I know goes by a new name, and I'm forgetting it at the moment, our colleagues in IRC, Moving Minds Alliance colleagues, and Anita Anastasio, who's here on the call. I also want to give a special shout out to you. I know you're at BRAC now, but you were an amazing force behind this effort when you were with the Lego Foundation, and we just have true admiration for your vision and patience with us. But it's been an amazing journey, and we're so proud of this work and looking forward to seeing where else it can inspire change. Thank you.